All right, it's time to start the party. It's not a Wednesday night. It's not a failed attempt at a Tuesday night. It's a Thursday night at 8:30 for the Panther-Lair Show. We used to do it on Tuesdays, moved it to Wednesdays, tried to move it back to Tuesday for this week. That didn't work out because the technology had to move it to Thursday. I don't think we've done Thursdays before. I was trying to think if we've ever done a Thursday Panther-Lair Show, maybe a special live stream after like a recruiting or some big news or something like that, but I can't really think of any time that we've done a Thursday live stream, a Thursday show. It's certainly not a post-game show. I remember after the North Carolina game last year, that was a Thursday night game, and I got home from Heinz Field at like 1 or 2 in the morning. We definitely weren't going live at that point. Some people wanted to. I got like DMs and text messages like, hey, come on, do the show. Why aren't you doing a show tonight? And I was like, I'm not doing a show at 1:30 in the morning. I got home from Heinz Field after the game, and you remember how that game went. Overtime against North Carolina in the rain, crucial part of the season. I had like a ton of stuff to write. It was, Thursday night was obviously very late, and we weren't doing a live show that night. Did a podcast, did the Drive Home podcast, which in a way is sort of the genesis of some of the things we're doing nowadays. That driving home from Heinz Field, just talking into my phone on the voice memo, and that's an interesting text message. Sorry, I got distracted there by text messages. It's recruiting season, and every now and then those text messages pop up that make things very, very interesting. So we're gonna have to pursue that once we get done with the show. Recruiting weekend coming up. Official visitors. We've got 9 confirmed right now. That number might jump depending on some of the follow-ups I send on the text messages later, replying to the text message I just got. So we'll have to keep an eye on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com for that. Of course, this is the Panther-Lair Show. I hate to do that sort of weird, vague tease, but I have a Mac, right? And I've had it for, did I get it this spring or last spring? I forget. I think I might have got it last spring. And it's cool. I think there are upsides and downsides to Macs and PCs. But one thing is your text messages show up on the computer screen. So I'm sitting here, I'm doing the show, I'm talking about Pitt stuff and breaking it down. And then there's a little text message that pops up there and I say, oh, that's very interesting. One of these days it'll be something that has enough information and context that I can share it on the show and we'll actually break news here on the show. But probably not. I would say those instances will be few and far between. We'll mostly keep the news breaking to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com because that's the place you need to go for Pitt news anyway, right? Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards where, quite frankly, we put a lot of the news that we break, we put on the message boards first. There might be an article that comes later. Maybe it's something that's not really meriting an article, but it's an important information, or an important piece of info, an important little nugget that you need to know, and we'll throw it on there. On the message boards. And so it's a great place for community. It's a great place for conversation. It's a great place for discussion with other Pitt fans. It's a great place for information. And we've got some insiders on the board, some people who, through the anonymity of message board handles, are able to share maybe some more information than people might be able to do with their real names, if you follow what I'm saying. So you get great info that way. And then, of course, the info that me and Jim Hammett and Houston Wilson and all these guys provide, on the reg, pretty much daily, particularly once you get to the month of June. So Panther-Lair.com is the website. You see it right there. You need to go check it out if you haven't. If you're a Pitt fan, you should be on there. It's the best online collection of Pitt fans that you're going to find, best online community for Pitt fans. And it's a chance to talk with Pitt fans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I don't exaggerate when I say that. There really are new posts popping up literally all hours of the day, and every day of the week. And so you got to go there, Panther-Lair.com. Of course, we do this live show right here on the Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Those are the 2 things that I ask you to do all the time, and I really appreciate it if you do. We've seen those numbers come up, and it's great, and that helps us. That helps us spread the word about what we're doing here, spread the word about what kind of content we have and what we're putting out. in terms of Pitt video content. Every Monday morning we release the weekend recap. So everything you need to know to start the week. You want to go to work on Monday morning and impress all your Pitt fan friends with all of your Pitt knowledge. This is the place where you get it. It's a 15 to 20 minute video and you just watch it and you know everything you need to know. And you're going to walk in and be the smartest guy or gal in the workplace. The weekend recap. You need to check that video out. It's been a lot of fun to do that. Of course, we're doing it in June when there's always a lot of news to go over after the weekend. So we're kind of, like I say, we're sort of cherry picking when we started that project. We'll see what it's like when it's the third week of July and we're trying to come up with 5 minutes worth of news or information to talk about on a Monday morning. But we're going to keep it going. I've enjoyed doing that, and you only get it right there on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then we try and do a Friday conversation. Every week, release a new video interview. We had Che Wabuko, the incoming Pitt freshman receiver, last week. That was a really interesting one. Jorge and Guillermo Diaz-Graham, I thought was a great video interview. That was a lot of fun to do. We had Jason Capel. We had Nellie Cummings. We're going to try and keep this up throughout the summer. Pitt players, coaches, recruits, people of interest, people that I think you would be interested to hear from on the Pitt front. We're going to release video interviews every week as much as we can. Sometimes the scheduling might not allow it, but we'll do our best to keep it pumping out week after week on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, then you'll never miss any of our videos. You'll never miss any of the live streams. When we have a week like this where we change Wednesday to Tuesday and then Tuesday to Thursday, you'll know about it because you're getting a little notification on the phone that says we're going live. So you'll never be unclear about what's going on. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe, like this video. So we're here. It's almost the end of June. Today's the 23rd, so there's a week left of this month before we head into July. And more relevantly for all of us and what we do and what the reason we're all here together, there's one weekend left in June, and that's this coming weekend. It starts tomorrow, the 24th through the 26th. It's when you follow recruiting, you start to learn these dates. These dates get kind of burned in your head. 2nd through the 4th, 16th through the 18th, 24th through 26th. Why? Because it's an official visit weekend. And Pitt's got official visitors coming to campus this weekend, including one of the highest rated players I can remember setting foot on Pitt's campus in a long, long time. And then a bunch of players at a key position group that really hasn't been addressed thus far in June. And so we got a lot to talk about on that front. Previewing the official visit, what it means and what could, come out here, what's sort of relevant, and what you need to know heading into the official visit weekend. Then we're also going to talk about the recruiting class. It stands at 11 right now. Really, it stands at 13. 11 of those guys have publicly announced. We'll see if by chance some of them, maybe somebody announces tonight or something. That would be news we could break. If we see it come across the Twitter machine that a recruit announced his commitment to Pitt, and I don't think any have. Let me just double check. A couple guys we're keeping an eye on. But there are two that have not announced yet. And so we're kind of letting that slide, waiting for them to make their announcements. We've talked on the message boards about who we think they are. We're pretty sure that we know who those other two commitments are. But for now, there's 11 announced commitments for Pitt in this 2023 recruiting class. Probably about half the class has been announced. You add in those other two to get to 13. You probably got about 9 or 10 spots that the coaches are going to fill the rest of the way. And so we can talk about what they might do with those extra spots and where those extra spots might go. But right now, that's where we stand. 13 total commitments, 11 announced. I want to start with this official visit weekend, though, because this is a big one. And it's big because of one. It's big because of one guy being the premier attraction and the headliner, not just of this weekend, but maybe of all the June official visits. And it's big because there are a whole bunch of guys visiting at a pretty key position. Let's start with the headliner, though. And it's Hykeem Williams, 5-star wide receiver out of Florida, number 16 prospect in the country. And that's regardless of position. We're talking the number 3 wide receiver prospect in the country in the class of 2023, and the number 16 overall recruit. I can't remember the last time Pitt had a recruit that highly rated on campus. I have to check and see where Quentin Martin is in the class of 2024. But in terms of official visits, in terms of rising seniors, I can't remember the last time Pitt had a guy ranked as highly as Hakeem Williams on campus for an official visit. Jonathan Baldwin was a 5-star. Dorian Johnson was a 5-star. I don't think either of those guys was number 16. I don't think either one was inside the top 20. I'd have to go back and double check. But even if they were, I mean, Dorian Johnson was the class of 2013. So you're looking 10 years ago. Jonathan Baldwin was the class of 2008. So you're like 15 years ago. Since these guys did it, since this level, this highly rated of a prospect was on campus. And that's what Hakeem Williams represents. And this is actually the second time he's been here. He came on an unofficial visit in the spring, which was huge in and of itself. Now, he took a lot of visits this spring. He raved about all of his visits this spring. And so when he visited Pitt and he spoke really highly of Pitt and it seemed like it went really well, I don't want to say you took it with a grain of salt, but you took it with the understanding, with the context that, all right, he's taking a lot of visits. He didn't just go to Pitt this spring. He went to a lot of schools. And he didn't just rave about his Pitt visit. He raved about a lot of schools. But then he narrowed his list to 6. He released the top 6, and Pitt made that cut. And then he scheduled an official visit. And that's where we are right now. This weekend, he's going to be on campus for an official visit. One of only 2 official visits he's taking this month. Took one to Georgia like a couple weeks ago, and he's taking one to Pitt this weekend. And that says a whole lot. It says a whole lot about a number of things. But really, the thing that it points to the most, the thing you should take away from the Hakeem Williams interest, the Hakeem Williams unofficial visit, and the Hakeem Williams official visit, the thing you should take away is that Taekwon Underwood is putting in work. And Taekwon Underwood is the guy leading the charge here. He had a relationship with Hakeem Williams when he was at Rutgers and had Hakeem Williams interested in Rutgers because of that relationship. And when he got hired at Pitt, that interest transferred over. And it just so happened it transferred to a school fresh off an ACC championship with a Biletnikoff Award winner and Heisman Trophy finalist. Neither of which are still on the team, but ideally you'd have the Heisman Trophy finalist coming back and you could say, this is the guy that's going to be throwing to you. Well, that's not the case. But what you can say is, look, these things can be accomplished at Pitt. You can win a Biletnikoff Award at Pitt. As a matter of fact, it's been done 3 times. You can be a Heisman Trophy finalist at Pitt. You can win an ACC championship and be that close to knocking on the doorstep of a college football playoff bid. These things can be accomplished at Pitt. And if there's anything that last season showed, whether it's the conference championship or the individual award recognition, if there's anything that last season showed that the coaches can hold up to the recruits, is that you can do this here. This can be accomplished. You don't need to go to Alabama to accomplish these things. You don't need to go to Clemson to accomplish these things. These things are very much in reach at Pitt. And I think that was the selling point after the 2018 season. For whatever you want to say about the 7-7 record, whatever you want to say about the Sun Bowl, whatever you want to say about their performance in the ACC championship game, or Kenny Pickett threw for 8 yards, for whatever you want to say about those things, the coaches were able to take that season and say, this is what you can accomplish. You can get to the ACC championship game at Pitt. Where you are, you're one step away from that ultimate next level. When you talk about the next level in college football, that is the ultimate next level in college football, is making the college football playoffs. And if you go to the conference championship game in a Power 5 conference, you can tell recruits, we are that close. We are one step away. And that's what they were able to sell after 2018. And they were able to make it resonate even more after this past season because they went to a New Year's Six Bowl. And they won the conference championship. And so for a recruit like Hakeem Williams, the number one piece to the puzzle is the relationship with Taekwon Underwood. And then you're able to fill it around. This isn't like you're trying to get him to go to Rutgers. You're trying to get him to go to a school that just won the conference championship, that beat Clemson in the middle of the season, that went to the Peach Bowl. And lost only because their top 2 quarterbacks, not just their starter, but their top 2 quarterbacks were out. You're able to sell these things of this is what you can accomplish at Pitt. You don't need to go to USC or Texas or Alabama to win the Biletnikoff. You can do it at Pitt, and it's been done 3 times here. You don't need to go to those schools to play in a New Year's Six Bowl. You don't need to go to those schools to be a Heisman Trophy finalist. Now, you can go to those schools and accomplish those things, but now there's sort of tangible evidence that you can also accomplish it at Pitt. And that's going to be a big selling point for Hykeem Williams when he comes for his official visit this weekend. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a slam dunk recruitment, and it's not going to be a recruitment that ends this summer. I think this recruitment's going to carry into the fall. I think Texas A&M is a big player. I think Georgia is probably the favorite, I would say. But I think Pitt probably has a better chance than a lot of people would be inclined to give them credit for. Certainly outside of Pittsburgh. I think when the national recruiting media looks at Hykeem Williams, looks at a top 20 overall prospect, a top 3 wide receiver in the class, and looks at his recruitment and looks at the schools he's considering and looks at where he might go, Pitt's the last one they look at in his top 6 as an option. And I don't think they're that far out of it. I think, and I could be wrong, and it's June 23rd and things can change, I think Pitt, they very well may be a top 3 option right now with Georgia and Texas A&M. And they may be battling with A&M to be right behind Georgia right now. That's kind of my read on it, talking to different people and just kind of getting a feel for things. And again, things can change. They could drop, they could climb. It's recruiting. There are always changes. Things are always in flux. We saw that this week on the message boards with some of the changes to the official visit weekend coming up, and even some of the information we had on the changes to the official visit weekend coming up. Things are always changing. And on the outside, we're always kind of trying to keep up because things are always happening a step or two ahead of us. But right now, I think there's a legit shot. Gun to my head, am I picking Pitt to be the school that lands Hykeem Williams? No. Just because I value my head. And the odds do not favor it. But I think they're probably, Pitt's odds are better than a lot of people give him credit for. And so Hykeem Williams really leads, he's the headliner of this weekend and he's the headliner of Pitt's month of official visits. And it's almost sort of fitting that he's coming on the final weekend. It's almost like everything's been building up to this point, even though recruiting is a much more broad enterprise and exercise than to say that it's all about one guy. They've landed 13 commitments already, and those guys are all pretty valuable in how they fit in with the team and the roster and the makeup going forward. But if there's one headliner in the month, if there's one headliner in the class, if there's one headliner this weekend, it's Hykeem Williams. And it's huge for Pitt to get him on campus. Now, the other thing, and before we get to comments and questions, I want to get over there soon and see what you guys are talking about, what you have to say, and make sure if you want to get your comments and questions in, if you want to make sure they get read, I should say, you can always be a super chatter. You click that little $ down at the bottom, support the podcast. We really appreciate that. You have my eternal gratitude for chipping in as we do this thing every week. But the other storyline for this weekend, and like I said, there's 9 recruits, possibly 10 coming in for official visits this weekend. The other storyline is offensive line. There are 6 offensive line prospects coming this weekend. One guy's been offered since February. One guy's been offered since Tuesday or something like that, or Wednesday, actually. One guy's been offered since Wednesday, since yesterday. They offered a kid yesterday, and he turned around and quickly scheduled his official visit for this weekend. And so they sort of run the gamut. A bunch, there's a handful of guys who got their offers at prospect camps this month. But these 6 make up 2/3 of the offensive linemen who visited Pitt or are visiting Pitt this month on official visits. There are 6 this weekend. There was 1 on the first weekend and 2 on the second weekend. And I think with a bigger recruiting class, which is what it's looking like Pitt's going to have, whether that's 22, 23, 24, wherever it ends up, with a bigger recruiting class and kind of the way the classes are balanced out on the roster right now, or maybe the way they're not balanced out on the roster right now, I think this needs to be a bigger offensive line class. 4 minimum, maybe 5. In which case, you're going to have to start landing some guys. They've had 9 visit this month. All 9 are still well, I shouldn't say all 9 are still uncommitted. The one kid they offered on Wednesday, BJ Williams from Georgia, actually committed to Memphis over the weekend when he took an official visit there. And then on Wednesday, they offer him a scholarship and get him to take an official visit here, which would sort of make it seem like he's a flip candidate if Pitt really wants him, if they want to push for it. But all 9, none of the 9 who have taken or are scheduled to take official visits to Pitt have committed elsewhere after visiting Pitt. Now, 6 of those 9 are visiting this weekend. So what that means is the other 3 have not committed to other schools after visiting Pitt. They're still on the board and still available for the Pitt coaching staff to try to land. I think, when you kind of break down what they have and who they've got coming in, I mean, Stanton Ramel, on the very first official visit weekend, a big-time offensive tackle prospect, the number 1 guy out of the 9 that are visiting this month, the guy that I think if you could pick one that you want them to get, that's the guy. He would make the recruiting class. If they signed him and any 4 of the other 8 that took official visits this month, you would say it's a good class of linemen because of him, because of his presence. And then there's Ryan Coretta, who took a visit the second weekend. It looks like it's Pitt or Michigan State for him. We'll see how that balances out. Phillip Daniels was a camp offer. He visited that second weekend. And then the 6 guys this weekend. So I think 4 or 5 out of these 9 were camp offers. Guys who came to prospect camp, one of the 4 prospect camps this month, without an offer, worked out with Dave Borbely and earned an offer either that day on the spot or a couple days later they got a call and said you have a scholarship offer based on your performance at the camp. A lot of times there's some skepticism about camp offers, particularly at offensive line. And I understand that. Personally, I go to every one of these prospect camps. I've gone to every Pitt prospect camp for the last 15 years or something like that. I've got to have some kind of streak running that few people, outside of Bob Junko and Chris LaSalla, I'm not sure if anyone's been to more Pitt prospect camps in the last 15 years than me. But I got to be honest, and this goes when we go to the Rivals camp, it goes for anything, offensive line drills during these prospect camps with, shorts and t-shirts and helmets. No thanks. I don't want anything to do with it. I think I think the value of these camps when it comes to linemen is you get to see them in person, see how tall they actually are, see if they're fat slobs or they actually carry their weight well, and maybe get a sense of how they run. If they run a 10-second 40, then you're okay, that's ridiculous. But the reality is you don't want your linemen running 40 yards anyway. But you wanted to, if they have to, you want it to take less than 10 seconds or less than 7 seconds or something like that, less than 6 seconds. But the drills, man, I can't stand watching it. It's so they favor the defensive linemen so much. I guess you could say, well, if an offensive lineman wins a bunch of the drills, then they must really be good. Kind of yes, but no. There's no It's hard to simulate the physicality that a guy is going to have to use in a game. So I think sometimes with these camp offers, the coaches might be pretty sure about a guy, but they want to bring him in, see him in person, double check, confirm his height, make sure, like I say, he carries his weight well, and see a little bit of how he moves, and then offer him. So I understand some skepticism sometimes if an offensive lineman earns his offer at one of these camps. But at the same time, there's something to be said for Dave Borbely confirming it in person, working with the kids, seeing how he takes to the coaching. Either way, I think the ideal makeup for the offensive line class, like I say, number 1, it would start with Stanton Ramel. If you can get him, you win. Game over. It's great. If you can't get him, you want to get maybe the 2 other guys who've had offers for a while, Ryan Coretta and Jordan Church. Church is visiting this weekend. And then get 2 or 3 of the camp offer guys or the late offer guys to fill it out. Ideally, you could get Ramel and Coretta and Church and 2 of the camp offer guys or late offer guys. Failing that, Coretta, Church, and 3 of the camp offer guys or late offer guys. I think that's what you're looking for. Either way, you need to get 3 commitments out of this weekend. You need to get 3 of these offensive linemen who are visiting this weekend to commit. Ideally, Jordan Church would be one of them. But I think you need to get 3 to start building this class of offensive linemen because it's the one big hole in the class. They don't have any tight ends committed, and they don't have any offensive linemen committed. And they need some of both. They need a bunch of offensive linemen, and they need at least 1 tight end. Although I think we've seen over the past 7 years that could be a tough ask when it comes to this coaching staff. For whatever reason, tight end is not their recruiting strong point. Gavin Bartholomew notwithstanding. So that's those are the two big storylines for this weekend. And there's more because, like I said, there's 9 or 10 kids coming in. And there's some other guys who I think are really interesting, some defensive backs. But it's really about the offensive lineman and Hakeem Williams. Those are the two things you need to know about for Pitt's official visit weekend. And those are the things that on Sunday, when we start interviewing these guys and rolling out articles and reviews of the official visit weekend, those are the things you're going to want to look for. Is what did Hakeem Williams say about the visit? Which of the offensive linemen committed? Because they're going to need to get some of them. Because you got to start getting numbers at that position. I think they need a big offensive line class. All right, let's get to comments and questions. I've talked long enough. Let's hear from you what you want to say. Coaster King says, survived. Pitt didn't cancel this. Yeah. We tried to go live on Tuesday night and do, we moved the live show from Wednesday to Tuesday night. Moment of, full disclosure, I went to a concert on Wednesday night. I skipped a concert last year, a Wednesday night concert, to do the podcast. I said, nope, got to stick to the podcast. And ended up really regretting it. And so I said, you know what, this time I want to go see, it was more my Morning Jacket was playing at Stage AE. I said, I want to go see them. It's a Wednesday night, but I'm going to go to the show, and I'm going to move the podcast either Tuesday. I'm going to move it to Tuesday. That was the plan. And it ran up, had a great time. Show was a lot of fun. Ran into some good people. Ran into some people who actually knew the podcast and said, oh, this is why you're not doing the podcast tonight. But we moved it to Tuesday night, and then ran into technical issues. Got about 5 minutes in or something like that, and it was buffering, and we lost our connection. So we had to just cancel it and move it to Thursday night. So I appreciate everybody who showed up here on a Thursday night, but we were joking on Tuesday night after the show didn't work that Pitt must have, Pitt was canceling official visits all over the place. They must have canceled the podcast too. So yeah, Coaster King, we are here. We're like a half hour into this thing, and nothing has happened yet. All right, Josh Newark says, is the sky falling in that, in theory, this should be Pitt killing it on the recruiting trail following the ACC Championship, Heisman Trophy, Biletnikoff winner, or should we trust the Narduzzi process of finding diamonds in the rough and overlooked prospects that Pitt will develop into superstars? All right, so there's a lot going on in your question right there, Josh, and it's I'm glad you asked it because there's a lot I want to talk about in your question. All right, I want to dig into that question quite a bit. Let's start with the recruiting bump that comes from winning the ACC Championship. All right, because I talked about this a lot. I talked about it last season. I talked about it throughout the offseason. I talked about it through the spring. I talked about it coming into June, about how Pitt was going to get a bump in recruiting from the success they had last year. I cited historical precedent, looking back at the 2009 season and the impact it had on the 2011 recruiting class. I talked about the 2018 season and the impact it had on the 2020 recruiting class. The 2020 recruiting class, which I think is one of Pitt's best. To be honest, I mean, one of the best under Pat Narduzzi. I mean, you look at, Jordan Addison, Dayon Hayes, and Solomon DeShields, and Bengali Kamara. I mean, just those four alone. And we could keep going beyond that, but that's a heck of a start. And so I talked about how this recruiting cycle would see a bump from the success they had last year. Now, part of the reason that I went down that path so often is that people kept asking, why didn't they get a bump in their recruiting for the last class? The class they were recruiting as that season was going on. And the class ended up ranked like number 63 in the country. And I said, well, there were a few things that went into that. Number one, it was ranked number 63 in the country because there were only 12 kids in the class. And while we try to be as qualitative as possible with the recruiting rankings and the team recruiting rankings, there's a quantitative element to it as well. That if you sign more kids, because it's cumulative points, and each recruit, based on their ranking and their stars and all that, are worth a certain amount of points. So the more kids you sign, the more points you're going to pile up and the higher you're going to be ranked. We try to standardize it to just counting the points of your top 20 recruits. But if you have a smaller class, if you have less than 20, you're going to be behind a lot of schools that have 20 or more. And so that was part of it. But the other thing I said is that, you're really going to get the bump in the next recruiting class. That if, where you see the impact is in that next recruiting class. We saw that after 2018. That spring of 2019 with Chris Beatty on staff, You know, off the strength of the Coastal Division Championship, they brought in a ton of really good prospects that spring, a ton of really good players that spring, and then proceeded, like I said, to sign, I think, a really good class in 2020, maybe Narduzzi's best class. And so I said, this is what we should be looking at coming out of last season. We should be looking at this class of 2023 being another really strong one. Now, there are a few things that I think have impacted how the class has gone. One big one, and this is a negative and there's no way to spin it, is Rodney Gallagher and Tamir Robinson. A significant part of my thought on this class leveling up for Pitt and getting a bump was that they were going to be in good shape with Tamir Robinson and Rodney Gallagher, 2 local 4-stars. You land those guys, the class has some real star power, and you feel great about it. You've got the best players locally. And that hasn't happened. That didn't happen, and that's not going to happen. Rodney Gallagher's committed to West Virginia. Tamir Robinson's probably going to Penn State. Pitt lost out on those. And you would have liked to think that the success of last season would help them with kids that they were already in really great shape with. I mean, a year ago at this time, it seemed like Gallagher and Robinson were, if not locks for Pitt, really strong leans, I guess is what I would say. But that didn't happen. And things changed over the course of the next calendar year. And I think there's a lot of reasons why things changed. College football recruiting changed a lot over the course of the next calendar year. Either way, they missed out on those guys. And that, I think that was part of the bump that I was really expecting, that I thought they would get. They would do better, they would get more, out-of-town guys, more out-of-state guys coming in. They'd get some really good prospects visiting, but they would also get those 2 guys, and that would be sort of the crown jewels of the class, the centerpiece of the class, and it didn't happen. Now, what did happen is they did have a really good spring in terms of bringing guys to campus, both in the 2023 class and the 24 class, and even some 2025s. I think they got into their prospect camps in June and had a really good turnout, both in terms of total numbers and some of the positions really brought out some good talent. And then you get to the official visits. There's been 2 official visit weekends so far, 11 commitments, I should say, out of, 26 kids who visited. Technically, you get 13 commitments because 2 of the 26 were already committed, and Zion Fowler and Kenny Minchie. But no 4-stars. And that's what I think a lot of this comes down to. There's a real aesthetic argument about 3-stars and 4-stars, and 4-stars look better, and you want to get more 4-stars, and why aren't they getting more 4-stars? And I understand that, because believe me, if they had 3 or 4 or 5 4-star recruits among the 11 commits that have announced so far, I would be, I would tattoo it on my forehead. I mean, I'd be talking about it nonstop. You'd be like, Chris, shut up about the 4-stars. We don't care anymore. So I'm not going to pretend like I would downplay it if they got a lot of 4-stars, because I wouldn't. But what I will say is that I think if you look at the recruits they've gotten, these were guys who have been priority targets for this staff for a long time. These are guys that this staff has wanted. These are guys that this staff has put in the top tier of its recruiting board. Not necessarily, it's not to say that Kenny Minchie was the number one, or Kenny Johnson was the number 1 wide receiver on the board. That's not to say that Antonio Kamen was the number 1 defensive end on the board. That's not to say that Shadarian Harrison was the number 1 cornerback on the board. But it is to say that all those guys were in the top tier, where if it's them and 3 other guys that the coaches all have kind of right around the same evaluation level, it's kind of whoever commits first. And that's not to say that they just took whoever was willing to commit. They took whoever was willing to commit out of the group that they were willing to take commitments from. Does that make sense? Now, I mean, there are some guys. I think Isaiah Neal was maybe their number 1 defensive tackle target. I mean, they are really high on Isaiah Neal, the defensive tackle. And I think they were pumped up to get him. I think that, I think Shelton Lewis and Bryce Pollock were really high on the board. I think Shadarian Harrison was really high on the board. I think these guys were top prospects. Rasheem Biles has drawn some ire from fans, but I think this is a guy they've been prioritizing for quite some time. And what I'm saying is that on the strength of the ACC championship, they've gotten the guys that they want. I feel like when I say that, I'm like making excuses for something, but I'm not, because I actually think this is a pretty strong class so far. It doesn't have that aesthetic appeal of star ratings, and there's a lot that goes into that. And maybe some of these guys will get a bump, maybe some of these guys won't. I don't know. I think some of them are underrated. I've been right on some of those underrated claims before, and I've been wrong on some of them. I thought Jordan Addison was underrated, but I also thought Michael Smith was underrated. So, you get 50-50 if you're lucky, right? But I think this is a good class. I think when you look at the prospects they've gotten, the biggest issue right now, the biggest issue with Pitt's 2023 recruiting class, the way it's currently put together, is not the guys they've taken. It's the fact that they don't have any offensive line commits, and they don't have any tight ends. And they've hosted 2 tight ends for official visits. Jackson McGohan, who's committed to Cincinnati and was committed to Cincinnati before he visited Pitt. So he visited Pitt as a Cincinnati commitment, took an unofficial visit in the spring as a Cincinnati commitment, came back for an official visit as a Cincinnati commitment. And then Zach Ortworth from St. Louis, who visited last weekend, who's down to like 4 schools. It's Pitt and 3 like Big Ten schools. And I think he's going to Iowa this weekend. I'm guessing he's going to pick Iowa. But that's what they need. And we talked about the offensive linemen already. They need offensive linemen in this class, and they need tight ends in this class. A tight end. That's, for me, that's really the only issue I see in the class right now. I think it's a pretty good class overall. And I think it's a class full of guys that the staff genuinely believes can help them win another ACC championship. And so I don't even think it's about, Josh, you said about finding diamonds in the rough. I don't even think it's about finding diamonds in the rough. I actually went down the list here. Let me see if I can find, I have a document because I'm writing about this for Friday in the 321 column. But this isn't diamonds in the rough. Kenny Johnson has offers from Boston College, Louisville, Minnesota, Penn State, Rutgers, Virginia Tech, and West Virginia. Shelton Lewis has offers from Boston College, Duke, Georgia Tech, Indiana, Louisville, Maryland, North Carolina, NC State, Purdue, Vanderbilt. Antonio Kamen has offers from Boston College, Duke, Florida State, Iowa State, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisville, Maryland, Ole Miss, Nebraska, Penn State, Rutgers, South Carolina, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, West Virginia. Isaiah Neal had offers from Boston College, Duke, Kansas, Louisville, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Ole Miss, NC State, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers, Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, West Virginia. Said that all in one breath. Bryce Pollock, Georgia Tech, Indiana, Kansas State, Kentucky, Michigan State, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, North Carolina, Penn State, Vanderbilt, Wake Forest, West Virginia. Shadarian Harrison, Illinois, Iowa State, Louisville, Nebraska, Oregon State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, West Virginia. Kenny Minchie, Michigan State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Virginia, Virginia Tech, West Virginia. Zion Fowler, Duke, Louisville, Michigan State, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. The only guys that have what you would even consider maybe light Power 5 offer sheets. Montrevious Lloyd, the running back, has Florida State, Wake, and West Virginia. Rasheem Biles has Purdue and West Virginia. And then Braylon Lovelace, the linebacker from Leechburg, has Virginia Tech. So those 3 guys have 3 or fewer Power 5 offers. The other 8 of the announced commitments have a lot more. And I think, the 2 unannounced commitments, if they are who we're pretty sure they are, and who we've said on the board that they are, they've got offer sheets that are right in line with all those other guys I just mentioned. These aren't diamonds in the rough. These are well-known prospects with healthy Power 5 offer sheets of schools that either Pitt should beat for recruits regularly. I think Pitt should be able to compete with, your Boston College, Duke, Kansas, Rutgers, Syracuse group, and then in Maryland even. And then the types of schools that I think, Pitt, if they really want to move up to the top of the tier that they're in, you know what I mean? In college football, they need to regularly beat Michigan State, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia Tech, Tennessee. They need to be able to go head-to-head with those schools for recruits, because those are the other kind of main schools at or near the top of that tier in college football. And you need to beat those schools for recruits in order to beat them on the field. You obviously have to coach them up. You have to be better coaches and all that stuff. But you need to get the players that those schools also want, so that in theory you'll have better players than they do. So I don't even, Josh, I don't even think about diamonds in the rough. I don't think it's about finding diamonds in the rough and overlooked prospects. Occasionally there are. I think Braylon Lovelace, a guy playing at single A in Leechburg, is overlooked. I think he might be a diamond in the rough, but even Virginia Tech was sold on him. Brent Pry was sold on him. So I think that says a lot. You know what I mean? I think that's worth something. And so, I don't consider these guys diamonds in the rough. I don't consider them overlooked prospects. Pitt has done that. They've found some guys who are overlooked, but even Servassier Dennis is like the most obvious example of like a totally overlooked, underrated, where did he come from guy. But like even some of these other like low-rated guys like a Rashad Weaver or Patrick Jones, those guys had other Power 5 offers. Rashad Weaver was a Michigan, decommit. Patrick Jones had Virginia Tech and I think a couple others. You might have like Louisville or NC State or something like that. Even some of these two-star guys. The rating system screwed it up, not other college coaches. Like they weren't diamonds in the rough in that situation. So I think when you look at this class, it may not have the star power right now, but it's got the offer sheets that you want Pitt's recruits to have. Sure. An ideal world, you'd be beating Alabama, Georgia, and A&M for every recruit. Every recruit, Pitt would sign would have Ohio State and USC offers and Penn State offers and Alabama and Georgia and A&M and Florida offers, and they would all pick Pitt over all those schools. That would be the thing that would make everyone feel the best about it. But you have to think about what's going to get you to the next level. What's really going to get you to the next level, which is where you're competing for, where you're regularly competing for the ACC championship, winning it, and then potentially, knocking on the doorstep of the college football playoff and potentially breaking in. What's going to get you to that level? It's going to be consistently winning. And you're going to need to beat the Clemsons every now and then. You're going to eventually end up in a matchup with Alabama or Georgia. But to get to that level, you need to be able to consistently go on the field and beat Carolina and beat Virginia Tech and beat Miami. That's what you need to do. You need to be able to do that every year. You need to be able to take care of business against those schools, because that's what will position you to play in the ACC championship game, where you're going to have a chance to push yourself into the college football playoffs. And so it starts right here at this level, where you go head-to-head with Carolina, with NC State, with Virginia Tech, with Miami. You go head-to-head with those schools trying to get recruits. And when you win those recruiting battles and you win more than you lose, you're going to have, ostensibly, a better roster. A roster that can compete with those schools and beat those schools. And so, these are the kinds of offer sheets that you want Pitt's recruits to have. You don't want to just have the MAC offers, right? And I think, so not to get too far on a tangent there, and I'm not ripping you, Josh, but I feel like what you asked there, I think, kind of, set the table for a good discussion that I think is important, and a few points that I think are important to make. Dominic Kern says, if the offensive line recruiting is poor this season, will Dave Borbely be on the hot seat? I don't think so. I think Borbely, unless the O-line play... Look, if the O-line play goes in the tank this year, with the seniors they have coming back, yeah, I could see Pat Narduzzi making a change with Dave Borbely. I'm personally of the opinion that Dave Borbely's probably going to be able to decide for himself when he wants to hang it up, and his next step may be retirement. He might not, be looking to move on to another job. I know he's moved around to a lot of jobs, but his next step may be just hanging it up altogether. The recruiting, I don't know what to make of it. But like I said, obviously they need to get some guys. Let's see. Scrolling down here. Josh Newark follows up. Should Servassier Dennis and Pat Narduzzi name names in which two schools are trying to recruit Servassier Dennis to transfer? Not in the press, not necessarily, but they should put something out to the NCAA. I think if you want to snitch, you should snitch, and snitch to the people who can actually do something about it. And then if you're not satisfied with those results, then yeah, maybe you try and put them out there publicly. Let's see. Talk is Pitt says, do you think if just one high-profile player committed to Pitt, more would follow? And when I mean high-profile, I mean borderline 5-star, already a 5-star. It's tough. It's tough to quantify that until after the fact, and a kid says, "Yeah, I committed." You know what I think it does. All right, if you're able to get, to some extent, even getting an official visit from Hakeem Williams, if you were able to get a commitment from Hakeem Williams, I think what it does is it draws attention. You know what I mean? It causes other recruits to take notice. It causes other recruits to take another look to say, whoa, what's going on there? I think that's what you're able to do if you were able to get a commitment like that. I think even getting a visit out of a kid like Williams can help along those lines. But that's what I think a commitment would do. I don't know if it would necessarily get I don't know if it would necessarily cause another commitment, but I think it would help get more eyes. Josh Newark says, tell me Pitt isn't going to have some non-traditional uniform for the backyard brawl. I can see it now. All eyes on ESPN. West Virginia busts out their country road unis, and Pitt comes out in Nike combat unis. I hope not. I mean, look, when you're Pitt, what's the... there's a great line in No Country for Old Men. When Javier Bardem is talking after... he's talking to the guy who had hired him, and he said, why would you call someone else in when you already have the best tool in the chest, or something like that. And that's... I butchered that line, but it's a great line in a movie full of great lines. That's the thing with Pitt. There's no need for alternate uniforms. You've got the best uniforms. And I mean, you already screwed it up once by changing from the retros a year, you know what I mean, that they had back in like 2016, 2017. Those, and 2018, those were perfect uniforms. Those were impeccable, perfect uniforms. They never should have been changed. They never should have been touched. You should have just worn those things forever. They were perfection. They really were, the home and the road. I mean, I really love the road. I think the road were especially sharp, but the home were great. You never should have gotten rid of those to begin with. You know, you didn't need to change the font. You didn't need to make little tweaks just to make it a little bit different. It was perfect as it was. But they went and changed it. Don't do anything goofy anymore. Even those gray uniforms, it seems like recruits like it. I mean, why... I don't know that... I don't know what the appeal is with those Steel Panther uniforms, but you don't need to wear them. just stick with the traditional. Stick what you have. You have a home and a road, and they're perfect. Just go with that. Let's see. Talkus Pitt says Russell Shell was a 5-star. I don't think he was. I think he was at one point, but I can look that up real quick. I think he was a 4-star by the end of it. 2012 running back. Yeah, he was a 4-star, number 55 in the nation by the end of it. At one point, I think he was a 5-star, but not at the end. Josh Newark says, I found it interesting that Taekwon Underwood retweeted the Miami decommit today. For some reason, I thought coaches couldn't do that until the commit signed with a team. Can you clear up what that rule is? Yeah, so they you can retweet recruits. Pat Narduzzi retweets the recruits all the time. You know, assistant coaches, you can retweet recruits. You can't publicly comment to them. You can't reply to a tweet publicly. You know, the public can't observe your conversation with them, but you can retweet them. And so he did. Lamar, the Miami decommit that Josh is talking about is Lamar Seymour. He was committed to Miami for about 2 years, took his official visit to Pitt last weekend, and announced, what day was that? Thursday? Today? That he announced he was decommitting from Miami, which I think everyone kind of expected to be coming. Now we just wait to see if there's another announcement on the way. Coaster King says, any chance at all Pitt gets Williams to commit this weekend? I mean, it's possible. But I would say it's unlikely. Not because I think Pitt has no chance of landing him, just because I think that his recruitment's going to go for a while. And it's going to go into the fall. And it's going to go into the winter. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a long road. And if they do get him, and you know what, it's going to be a long road on his recruitment, whether he commits on Sunday, June 26th, or he commits on, November 26th or December 16th or whatever it is. It's going to be a long road with his recruitment. If you get him now, you're going to have to fight like crazy to hold on to him for 6 months. So that's going to be part of it. General So's Chicken says, will Pitt beat West Virginia by 3 touchdowns? I don't like to predict any game to be a 3-touchdown game. And particularly the first game of a new season with a new quarterback and a new offense. I really don't like to predict that a game will be a 3-touchdown game. I do think Pitt should win that game, but a lot of it, of course, as we've said a million times, is going to depend on Keaton Slovis and how he plays and how this offense does. Scroll down here. Josh Newark, favorite Tony Siragusa memory. I didn't watch Siragusa when he played at Pitt, so probably my memories of him are sideline reporter for was he on Fox and being on The Sopranos. But obviously, one of the legendary Pitt players, one of the legendary Pitt characters. Certainly a character of football, a legendary football character, and Baltimore Raven, kind of disliked that, as a Steeler fan back in the day, but it's sad to see him go. He was 55. Rest in peace to the Goose. Let's see. Thomas Wilkie says, you think Pitt's going to run the ball a lot more this year? I think they will run more. I don't think they're going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I don't think they're going to run 50 times a game. I think they're going to try and have a little more balance. Mark Whipple didn't want balance in his offense. He wanted to throw the ball. And he wanted to throw the ball no matter who his quarterback was. And certainly when his quarterback was Kenny Pickett, the way Kenny Pickett was playing last year, he wanted to throw the ball all the time. And it's not difficult to understand. It's not incomprehensible. It's not a terrible decision. Kenny Pickett was the best player on the team last year. So you want to put the ball in his hands. You want to have him throwing the ball. I don't know, how that translates to this year. Kind of depends on how the quarterback does. Look, Frank Cignetti, I think, is really good at ascertaining the weapons he has and using the weapons he has. If he has a really good running back, he'll use the really good running back. If he has a really good receiver, he'll use the really good receiver. If he has a really good tight end, he'll use the really good tight end. 2009 is a great example of that. He spread the ball around. Dion Lewis ran for a ton of yards, 1,800 yards or whatever it was. But Jonathan Baldwin had a big season, and Doran Dickerson had a big season. You can, and that was 2009. 13 years later, offenses have evolved. You run plays more quickly. You run more plays in a game. You can get the ball to a lot of guys. You can make plays in a lot of ways. And I think they've got the talent at running back, at receiver, and at tight end to do that. It just comes down to whether the quarterback can get them the ball. If he can make the reads and make the throws to get them the ball. I think the running backs are good enough to carry the load if they want to be a run-heavy offense, but I don't think they need to be. And in the ACC, I'm not quite sure that they should be. I think they should still be pass dominant, but I think they can do that and run the ball more than they did last year. Let's see. Ryan Roseweir says, thoughts on Jasir Whittington's drop in the rankings? I'm not making much of it until all is said and done. I don't know what to tell you about that. Don't ask me rankings questions. All week, I'm not yelling at you about this, Ryan, but all week there have been questions about rankings and stars and ratings. And look, I try to offer input on some of these things. Sometimes that is heard and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it falls on deaf ears and sometimes it's sometimes it's taken under consideration. I don't know what caused Jasir Whittington to drop in the rankings. I still think he's really good. I saw him in person at Pitt's prospect camp. He seemed to move really well for a guy his size. I think he looks like a really good, one of those kind of, I don't want to say undersized, but sort of like smaller defensive tackles, playmaking defensive tackle. He looks like he's the next in line at that spot. I don't know why he dropped. Can't answer that. Let's see. John Christofich says Pitt's 2023 class is ranked 28th by rivals. We have 11 3-star players. Yeah, they're all 3 stars right now. They are at 28. That will improve if and when the other 2 unannounced recruits make their announcements, because they're not really all that far off. The thing that's happening right now, and what you'll see right now in recruiting team rankings, is just constant shifting. Pitt was at 31, then they had their big official visit weekend and got a bunch of guys, and they were up to 26. Now they're back down to 28. If they get a couple more guys, they'll move up. It's just because it's based on cumulative points, and we update it every time there's a new commitment. Schools are just constantly moving, and they're all bunched up right now. Like Pitt has 810 points. Illinois is right ahead of them with 825 points. Illinois has 12 commits and 1 4-star. Oregon is right ahead of them at 830 points. Now, that's based on only 8 commitments with 4 4-star prospects. Wisconsin's right ahead at 840 points. So that's a 30-point difference between 25 and 28. 4 schools that are separated by 30 points. It's not it's not spread out. It's not set in stone, and it's so bunched up right now that any movement, commit or decommit, is going to cause movement up and down the rankings. So they're at 28 right now. They could move up or down pretty quickly and pretty easily. Let's see. We'll get to Brock McDonough's question here. He says, do you see the safety that announces official visit to Pitt this weekend could commit by the end of the weekend? Yeah, he's talking about Jeremiah Anglin, who's a safety defensive back, announced he's going to be taking an official visit to Pitt this week. I like him a lot. I think he's got a lot of potential. He could play corner or safety. He's like a 6'2" defensive back. I think he'd be a really good safety in this defense. He hasn't taken any other official visits, and he plans to commit. His dad told me in the next couple of weeks. We'll see. That you kind of put 2 and 2 together there. He took an unofficial visit to Kentucky like last week, and he took a bunch of unofficial visits in the spring. But when you only have one official visit, and it's going to be the last one before you commit, I think you have to like the chances. And so I think it could be another really good Florida defensive back for Pitt if he decides to do that. And then Brock also asks, are any of these offensive linemen coming in this weekend have committable offers? And who's one offensive lineman out of this group coming in this weekend that you like? So as I said, most of the guys, they have 6 guys coming in this weekend. One guy had an offer since February. One guy got his offer last week. One guy got his offer on Wednesday, and the other 3 were camp offers. I think they're all committable offers. I don't think the coaches would offer guys right now and not be willing to take their commitment. So maybe they want to see him on campus. Maybe they want to see him in person and see what their size really is like and that kind of thing. But I think they're all committable right now. Who do I like out of the group? I like Jordan Church, the guy that's been offered since February. Some of these newer guys are intriguing too. They have decent size and seem like they could potentially play tackle or guard. Like I say, I think you need to get 3 out of this weekend at a minimum, and then hope you can get 1 or 2 of the first 3 guys who visited over the first 2 visit weekends. That's kind of how I think would be ideal. But at some point, they got to start adding offensive linemen to this class. I don't think you want to get to the end of the summer and not have any offensive linemen committed. I think you want to do a little bit better than that. Yo boy Vinster is a super chatter, and I appreciate you. You don't look like you have anything to say. You just said hi, so hi. Nice to see you, but I appreciate you being a super chatter and chipping in, supporting the podcast. That's helpful for sure. But yeah, big official visit weekend coming up, like I said, with Hakeem Williams, 5-star wide receiver, number 3 receiver in the country, coming in to take his official visit. That's a huge, huge visit for Pitt. We'll see what they're able to do with that. And then the 6 offensive linemen. Those are the 2 big storylines. There's a couple defensive backs coming in, and that's interesting. We'll follow that story. But it's really about Williams and how Pitt does with him and these offensive linemen and who they're able to get out of that group. So those are the things we'll be watching. Those are the things to keep an eye on. The first 2 visit weekends were Thursday to Saturday. This one is Friday to Sunday, so you can look for the updates start coming out on Sunday. Maybe, we saw that first visit weekend, recruits, a few committed on that second night. So it was a Thursday to Saturday visit. They committed on Friday night. A handful of guys did. So maybe we're watching for some news there on Saturday night. We'll see what actually comes out there. But Sunday is going to be the day. Sunday is going to be the day that we're keeping an eye on everything. So make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com on Sunday on the message boards and on the content. Follow us on Twitter at Panther-Lair. And of course, Monday morning we'll be recapping all of it. The weekend recap will be coming to you right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you like this video. That way you'll never miss a live stream. You'll never miss a video re-release. You'll be on top of everything that we do on our YouTube channel with all the video content we're pumping out. I think we're doing some really good stuff. I think it's really cool. I'm enjoying doing it. I hope you're enjoying watching it. If you want to make sure you don't miss it and you want to support us and you want to stick with it and help us spread the word, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and like this video. That's huge as well. So thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Thanks in the chat, everybody who jumped into the conversation and discussion. It's been a lot of fun tonight, as it always is. We'll be back at our regular time. I think we'll be back at our regular time next week. Let me look at the calendar really quick. I think we'll be back on Wednesday night. Wednesday looks like I got a busy day, but nothing at night. The only thing at night, podcast, 8:30 to 9:30. So we'll be back for the podcast, the regular weekly Wednesday night show at 8:30 p.m. Make sure you tune in, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and we'll talk about what this whole month has been. It'll be a month-long recap next Wednesday night. So join the conversation there. Thanks everybody who's in the chat tonight. Thanks everybody who watched the video and listened to the podcast. We appreciate you more than I can say. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday night.